What's happening, everybody? In this video, I'm going to look at some basic things you can do to create accents and runs into new sections with things like the brass, flutes, and violins. So let's have a listen to this little example thing I just recorded before this video to play around with. So what I want to do is to really enhance these transitions here, as well as here. There's a little cymbal swell and a brass accent, but I really want something more. And something we can do there is using little runs leading into the next section. So the first thing I want to look at is using flutes to do this. So if you want to do this from scratch, there's a couple of things I want you to keep in mind. The first one is that you can use either pieces of a scale or a whole scale that ends on usually the root. So if you're modulating into a new section, you might want to try to end up in the root note of the chord you're ending up in. But in this case, we're just staying in the key of C mixolydian. So what I want to do here is to basically do a quick run like this, or just staying to the normal C major scale, into this. And this is going to really enhance the transition and make it a lot more interesting. So what I have here is a very basic C major scale that just goes stepwise. In 30-second notes. And this you can just, type in manually like this. And then I'll have to move it like this. And let's just move the one we just did a little bit further. Just here, just so we can have a look at it. And I want to, extend it a little bit like that. So you can do that from scratch. And here I've used the legato track, and something else that you can do is to use the mod wheel or the mod wheel info to just make it, kind of roll in and reach the peak around there. So I'm going to do that on this one as well. And of course, I'm just going to delete the first one that I just did from scratch. But as you see, it's really simple to do it. You just either write it in or play it like this. And just make sure that it's quantized and don't sound too sloppy. Now, when you have that, what you can do is just to duplicate this into some of the other instruments. Copy that in here. And maybe I want the oboe to be an octave below, because that's going to give it a bit more body. That sounds pretty good. And woodwind instruments are really good at playing these fast runs and scales compared to, say, the brass instruments, just because of how the instruments are played and made and the basic features of them. Suddenly we have a very simple but effective run into this section. Now I want to look at something else that we can do to spice it up, and that is to do something like this, which is going to give us a little run that is going to be just an exciting little added feature in the middle of this passage. And this is the same as we did here, just that it goes down on the other side as well. And I can double that in the oboes, also an octave below. And something that helps with these things is also use the mod wheel so that you can kind of control the energy here. Because if I just do it maximum from beginning to end, it can be a little bit much. It usually sounds better if it kind of comes sweeping in and then out again. So I'm going to do that in strings as well and copy this over to the violin. And the violin, I also want an octave down next to the oboe. And you can also use the violin just to enhance this general run we had in the beginning as well. And I might use this run in this transition as well. And do that with the flutes we got as well. I'm just going to use the same piece of MIDI. And for the oboe. So those are some basic ways that you can add some extra details with the flutes and with the strings and the oboe in octaves. Now I really recommend using octaves because that's going to make it thicken out a little bit and make it a bit more defined and not as sharp and brittle as only using a higher octave. So having a couple of octaves is usually a quite good idea. So those are some basic things that we can do. Now let's look at how we can use the brass instruments to further enhance this. So here I have this articulation from, I think it's arc 1, which is just a swell. So the crescendo, and you can use these effects to just really propel yourself into this next section combined with the woodwinds. Let's look at that. And I wanted to not start too early as well. Let's see how this sounds. It's giving it even more body and weight going into the next section. Let's do the same thing with some rips in horns. So I want that last note to be the one we end on as we hit the new section. So I might have to take this a bit earlier. That's more like it. And combined, we have this. And those little things make quite a big difference in the end, in really making each transition a bit more exciting and keeping the energy up as you move in. And of course, once you get these basic things down, you can experiment with different ways of doing it so you don't do it the same way every single time. But these are some basic good starting points that are really effective, and it's basically just using a scale ending up on the note, the root note of the key, and the chord they're ending up in. And you can also use just a part of the scale. Or the whole scale. And if you want to do some extra little things in there as well, like I did in the middle here, you can go both ways. Or go from the fifth to the fifth. Or anything in between. Have fun and experiment with these, but these are some basic ways you can use violins, flutes, oboes, and brass instruments to really propel yourself into your next section. Let's listen to everything and then move on. That's all for now. I'll see you guys later.